Hey everybody, welcome back to the BogeyBallSociety. We have a very, very special episode today. If you watched the Open Championship, if you watched Ryan Fox become the champion golfer of the year, you might know this name. We have Karl Morris. He's now a 7-time major champion performance coach. He's author of the book, The Mind Caddie. He's the main host of the Mind Caddie Golf Podcast. He wrote all the Lost Art series books prior to the Mind Caddie. He has an app out called the Mind Caddie, and he has a very, very interesting and unique perspective on the game of golf and how you can play better golf. Listen to this one from start to finish, and I got a feeling you're going to play it several times over. Enjoy this one. Folks, here's Karl Morris.
But I want to start first by thanking you for your time. I know the demands on your time have certainly climbed. I imagine I'm sure you were busy before, but now it's climbed a lot, right? I mean, I just saw you on the Rick Shields podcast, so
Yeah,
we'll call that a proper warm up for the Bogey Ball Society.
that's my practice for the real thing.
Right, right. Um, and we'll start there. I mean, congratulations on the Ryan Fox win. I want to kind of dig into, if you don't mind, and the extent you can kind of elaborate. Can you tell me kind of the genesis of that relationship? Like, how long have you been working with him, and what brought him to you and said, hey, Carl, can you help me here?
Yeah, it's been 7 years now is that I've known him. The first time I actually met him was at the club that I coach, Delamere Forest in the northwest of England, which is a beautiful golf course, and that's how the original relationship started. Because his manager, Ian Keenan, who I've known for a long time, he was a player and then went into player management. He was a member there at Delamere Forest, so he brought Foxy along and we walk 9 holes, which I tend to do with all the players that I work with the first time we get together, just to get a real feel for what's happening on the course. And obviously, as I saw him there, I thought this is a pretty special talent. Way back then he'd got his DP World Tour card. He'd done pretty well on the Challenge Tour. The lineage with his family, as I'm sure you've heard about, the sporting genetics that
Mhm.
he's been gifted with. His father being a legendary All Black rugby player, and then he's on his mother's side. Merv Wallace was a great New Zealand cricketer. So yeah, I think the genetics were always going to be pretty strong. But yeah, clearly he was a guy when he came along. He was very open to wanting to work on the performance side of the game and keen to explore a few ideas, and that's where it started. And then we've spoken pretty much every week since then for the last 7 years. And if he's on vacation, obviously we don't speak. But if he's playing on tour, we'll speak pretty much every week. And sometimes the conversations are a couple of minutes. Sometimes they might be quite a long conversations. But there's certain themes that keep reoccurring, which if you watch the the win at Birkdale, some of the key themes came through hopefully at key moments, really, which I'm sure we can perhaps go into.
Well, and the other thing I want to ask you, when he came to you, eh, I think what maybe is immediately obvious, or kind of comes to mind for the casual observer watching him play, is there are some atypical aesthetics, at least, of his swing.
Yeah.
But he came to you, and did he, during your tenure with him, has he not been prompted or pushed, or have folks suggested to him, hey, you've got to change this, you side bend too much, et cetera, technical?
Yeah. I mean, he's got a fantastic coach that he's been with since he was about 17 or 18, Marcus Wheelhouse, who's a Kiwi. We spent a good deal of time together. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we were there at Birkdale for the practice rounds for the Open. And Marcus is a genius, because it would be so easy to look at Fox's swing, look at his grip, look at his setup, look at his side bend, look at his playing of his swing. There's a million things where
Mhm.
I think a coach with less knowledge about golf would just dive in and do what I call lazy coaching. Lazy coaching is where you put up, Adam Scott or Tiger Woods or whatever, and say, well, you should be in this position or you should be in that position.
Right,
And
do it like this. Yeah.
Yeah, do it like this, that there's got no relevance perhaps to the individual. Hopefully, we're moving away from that. I know there's a million great coaches out there who are moving away from that, but the idea that you should just give somebody a series of positions to focus on in a golf swing in the hope that that's going to develop the skill of impact conditions being better. I hope that all the science has said for a long time that's not the way that humans learn.
Right.
We've gone down that rabbit hole for so long, and hopefully coaches are now seeing that. Ultimately, is that you've got to do two things to get good at golf. One is you've got to develop skill, and the swing isn't the skill. Influence and impact is a skill.
Mm.
Influencing how you interact with the ground in the short game is a skill. Developing feel from 10 to 20 feet on the putting green is skill. But having a better looking golf swing isn't a skill as such. It might be a route that helps you get better at golf, but for an awful lot of people, I think if you get clear on what skills you need to work on,
Mm.
and then, maybe more importantly then, and this would be my hope for the coaches of the future, is that you see that to really get the best out of any individual, it's about developing the skill, but then helping them access the skill. Because it's no good having skill if you can only access it in one environment, the range, and it doesn't come out when you really want it in a tournament or on the golf course. So I think, that's what excites me about the future. And I think we're only just scraping the surface of a tip of a massive iceberg, really, of understanding more about the the unique nature of each individual. It's a study of one, I believe, that when you've got somebody in front of you, and that's not a cliche. Just swing your swing. I'm not just saying that.
Sure.
We need to obey physics of impact. We need to obey the path and the face and the strike location, ground contact, things like that. But I think hopefully we're now moving towards an area where we can get excited about each individual that we see, or each individual listening to this. I've said for 20 years, it's not about finding the way, it's about discovering your way to play great golf. And I think that's a really exciting journey to go on for either as a player or as a coach.
Oh, no question. I know you had John Dunnigan and Dr. Will Wu on your podcast. We did as well, and the science of motor learning and how one really learns, to like practice variability and the notion of practicing around the shot, not just precise, over and over trying to hit the stock shot, but practicing around it. I think there's a lot of fascinating developments going on. No question about it.
Well, the one thing that when John was on the show, that this idea of the Goldilocks principle, I call it trapping the feeling.
Mhm.
That, how do babies learn to walk? They don't learn to walk by getting it right. They learn to walk by falling left,
Right.
falling forwards, falling backwards, falling right, and eventually the brain organizes around that. And I look back to my playing days, and I think, what the hell was I doing?
Yeah.
Because I used to just stand there trying to get it right all the time.
Right.
I never
Just trying to bake
explored.
it in, right? The next rep will be the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that this session, if I can just hit enough good shots in this session, hopefully that will come forward with me into the next round of golf. And I just think, we got led down a wrong path. I think it was just the way that we were told, the idea of putting the reps in and,
Mhm.
grinding and all the rest of it, and all these words and terminology that we've been told, where when we start to understand is that, the genius of the body. I mean, we're a product of a few billion years of evolution, and we've mastered things like moving objects to targets for thousands and thousands of years. And, I'm not sure if there are any spear throwing coaches or rock throwing coaches when we were roaming around in caves, but I suspect not, because otherwise we might have
Right.
petered out as a race.
We might not have survived. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it with Ryan Fox and Sunday at the Open, was there a particular moment that was, the proud papa moment? I know everyone wants to immediately go the bad break and his response to it on 15. That has to be high on the list, but was there a particular
Yeah.
quality of that round that stood out to you?
I think right from the word go, we've talked a lot these last few years. We've probably had, I don't know, 400 conversations about acceptance, which I think acceptance can be really misunderstood. I think we can pass over it very easily and think, "Oh, that's just tree hugging, nonsense."
Mhm.
But I think when you deeply understand the principles of acceptance, and when you understand the effect that has on our brain, whereby one of the keys is to accessing your skills is whether your brain perceives the golf course as an opportunity or a threat. That is a huge thing for people to consider, whether it's trying to break 100, winning your club championship, or playing on tour, trying to win a major. Our brain, at a very deep level, really isn't that concerned whether you play good golf or not. It's really, really still concerned primarily with one thing, which is survival. I know that sounds crazy in the modern world, but it's kind of like we've got our brain, Mark 1 is has been fantastic for evolution and fantastic for survival, but it's kind of a bit out of date now because metaphorically, when we come out of the cave these days, there's not the same threats there
Mhm.
that there was 20, 30,000 years ago, but our brain still is scanning the environment constantly for threat. And if we perceive threat, guess what we do? We have three primeval responses. We fight, flight, and freeze, which again are fantastic for survival, fantastic for running away from predators and fighting predators,
Yeah.
but not that great to try and, you know,
Over a 6 footer.
shred a left to right 6 footer in the wind. So
Yeah.
long-winded, what I'm getting back to is that acceptance, if you go out with a willingness to sort of say, "I'm gonna go out there with an intention today, but I'm willing to accept the variety of outcomes that there'll probably be out there, but I'll deal with it, and I know I'm gonna be okay." I'll have a lot of players say, "This sounds crazy," but you need to keep saying to your brain when you play golf, "I'm gonna be okay.
Mm.
Thanks for trying to protect me by firing these thoughts into my head about don't miss it right and make sure you do this and what if this happens and what if that happens." Because one of the survival mechanisms that our brain employs is to produce lots of thoughts.
Mhm.
Predicting the future, overwhelmingly predicting a bad future. So when we start to deeply accept that there could be a variety of outcomes, but I'm willing to do that anyway. I'm willing to step up and do that. And I think that's where Ryan Fox was in the final round. I think he said it. He was willing to go out there and actually pursue good shots, pursue the chance of winning. And yeah, it could have easily gone wrong in a few times in that final round. I think his tee shot on 14, where he took it on with driver, was a great example of that when
Mhm.
the momentum was slipping a little bit. But then we come to 15 where, as you say, everybody's gonna remark on that, but he's hit a good tee shot. Looks like for all the world he's gonna have a sort of 6, 8 footer for a 2 on a tough par 3 and ends up in an unplayable lie, but then goes and walks up there, and great credit to his caddy, Dean Smith, on this. There was an acceptance of this is what it is. What's the shot? It wasn't like build a story around why me and how unlucky
Sure.
is that, and I've blown the open. And that, I think that's the biggest message for anybody listening with this is that in any situation on a golf course, you're either creating the story or you're dealing with reality. And the story could be, "Oh, I don't deserve a lie like that after such a good tee shot," or, "Why is play so slow?" Or, "I practiced so hard, I deserve to play better than this." Those are all stories, and
Yeah.
we create those stories, or we're dealing with the reality, and the reality is the ball is where it is. We have a phrase with a lot of players, "It just is." It just is. It's in the bunker. What are you gonna do about it? You're gonna bitch and moan for 20 minutes about it, or are you actually gonna deal with it and pitch it out backwards and then maybe make the greatest bogey ever in championship golf on that par 3.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fantastic. I gotta tell you, for me, one of my I think we're not talking about it that much, but to my mind, one of the most impressive shots of the entire round was the last one. And of course, it's a putt to win the Open. There's nerves associated with that. But the decisive manner in which he just stayed in his routine and rolled it like he rolled every other putt that round was so impressive to me. I remember watching the Ryder Cup at Medina in 2012. And I won't single out the particular American, but the American had a rather critical putt. And he must have stepped away from the putt and reread the thing and found new angles and he dressed the ball and then stepped away and he might have read that thing 15 times. And after about the third time, I'm like, there's no way he's going to make this because he's so radically outside of his routine. It
Yeah.
has Ryan always had that deliberate pace of play mentality to him, or is that something you've worked to cultivate over your tenure with him?
there's certainly, I mean, the number of people who've said to him over the years, "You need to slow down." I mean, if there was one person who's
Really?
told him that over the years, there must be thousands, and his coach knows him so well, and that's the worst possible thing
Yeah.
that you could ever say to Ryan Fox, "Slow down," where he becomes conscious
Mm.
of what he's doing. What we did do, what's interesting, and this is the study of one bit, is we earlier in the week, we could see in his putting routine that I don't know, you've heard of the stuff or you've seen the stuff about quiet eye research, which
Mhm.
is really interesting, all that kind of stuff, and, yeah, I'm sure you've heard of it. But it was really clear, both Marcus and myself kind of seen him in day 1 and 2 at Birkdale. He was kind of what I call pecking. He was pecking at the target. He was looking without seeing, because we all tend to fall into that trap from time to time. We actually don't take a strong look at the target. So on the Tuesday afternoon, we started to talk to him about a strong last look, a strong last look at your entry point into the hole. Now, this is where he'll buy into the idea of a strong last look, but that doesn't feel he doesn't feel like he's slowing down as a result of doing that. There's a purpose to it.
Mhm.
So, I think it was 35 seconds, wasn't it, from when Sam Burns knocked it in to when to when he
Yeah.
actually holed it. But there was purpose to everything that he did, and part of the purpose was a strong final look at the entry point into the hole and then go. I think the instructive thing about what he talked about was, that's hopefully useful for everybody, was that he said that every part of his body was shaking,
Mm.
but he still managed to hold the putt. And I think that, again, the strong takeaway from that is we all get sort of told, "Oh, you have to be in a zen-like state and relaxed and calm." Those are all nice things when they come along, but often that's not the case, and we have thoughts and feelings and sensations, and we feel uncomfortable. But if you put your attention in the right place, you can still get the job done, even in the presence of some of those sensations. So, this idea that we have to be in a perfect state to play good golf, to me, is a nonsense. And every one of us have hit good shots when we felt uncomfortable, and we've also hit bad shots when we felt great. So, you know, I think there's a real strong message there that, don't try and resist your experience. If you've got energy flowing through your body that some people call nervousness, at times, embrace it's okay, embrace that. You
Yeah.
can still get the job done if your attention's in the right place.
Yeah, no, I think you're hitting on an important distinction. I think a lot of casual golfers or amateurs might kind of think that a strong mental game means they don't get nervous, which isn't the case, right? It's just a question of what you do. Yeah, well, let me ask you that question. Like, how would you define a strong mental game then? Because it's clearly not doesn't get nervous, and it's not doesn't have doubts and negative thoughts, but it's what do we do with them, right?
I think my definition now is of a strong mental game. You're right. Good players get nervous, even though we're told that they're not. Good players have negative thoughts. Good players have ridiculously bad thoughts come into their head. To me, mental toughness or mental strength is the ability to notice your thoughts, but not necessarily get involved with those thoughts, and to actually be able to see them for what they are, which is kind of passing energy across the screen of your mind from a brain that's hell bent on trying to protect you and help you survive. So I think, to me, I've changed a lot in the last number of years with this. It's not about changing your thinking. It's about changing your relationship to your thinking.
Mm.
And there's a huge difference between the two there. And when you can notice your thoughts, and when you can not take your thoughts quite so seriously, then you're really in a different place. It never ceases to amaze me the amount of crap that my brain still comes up with on a frequent basis. And, I think, where the hell did that come from?
Right.
And feeling uncomfortable for no reason in a certain situation, but being okay with that and sort of saying, okay, right, well, what am I here to do? What, as cliched as it sounds, what's the task? The task, whether it's a putt to win the Open or whether it's a putt to break 100, the key really is to get into the task, not what the task means.
Mhm.
So, the task is to roll a ball to a 4 o'clock entry point into the hole. The task is to roll it over a spot 6 inches in front of you, or whatever you choose to do in your routine, which is something that's personal. That's the task. Whether it means that you break 100 or win the club championship or win an open, that's what the task means, and the discipline is to stay with the task, not the meaning of the task.
Okay. Well, let me ask you that, and I wanted to. We'll definitely get into the book, The Mind Caddie, but your response there just kind of triggered something for me. The notion of swing thoughts. So we talk about
Yeah.
a strong mental game and the relationship to thoughts, but are some thoughts or technical thought or two appropriate and good? Like and so again for amateur applicability, I find when I'm nervous or I'm anxious over something, I find that I don't turn as well, right? It tends to be kind of the
Right.
small muscle swing. And so to me,
Yeah.
there's benefit in having a technical swing thought of turn, make sure I turn. Is that acceptable, or is that a path to success, or is that, you need to flush that? Because, and I'm kind of going there with, I think it's chapter 15. You talk about how to get into the zone, right? And
Mm,
playing from the cerebellum rather than those technical thoughts that are in the cortex, right?
mm. Yeah. What I would say on that is that I'll answer it through one of my heroes, which was the great martial artist who died sadly very, very young back in the 70s, Bruce Lee.
Mm,
Bruce Lee was not only a great martial artist, but he was a great scholar. He read thousands of books, and they believe that towards the end of his life, he had a premonition that he was gonna pass away early, and he wrote down what he believed were the 4 key tenets to getting better at anything that you wish to improve on, whether it was karate, kung fu, golf, tennis, or business. And the 4 tenets, and the first one, and I think that it's so important, what Bruce Lee said, we all need to research our own experience.
mm,
And I think we've got away from that in the sense that we're always wanting somebody to tell us what to do of, you know, you should have this kind of swing thought or not that kind of swing thought. And, I'm really clear on now. I think that's why I think, journaling is such a valuable thing. Not in a structured way of writing the same questions every time and all this kind of stuff is, but researching your own experience. Now, what you've just said there, it's like when you go on a golf course, you've got a toolkit with you. Is the part of that toolkit when you feel yourself getting nervous, the swing thought of making a better turn may well be a really appropriate toolkit for you, part of your toolkit to use.
mm,
Now, as a generalization, I prefer, instead of thinking about swing thoughts as such, is a little bit more about what I call the 1 point, the idea that when you swing a golf club for 1.4, 1.5 seconds or whatever, can you place your attention in one place for the duration of that swing? And we kind of found that there's probably 5 areas that you could use with that. It could be the target, it could be ball flight,
mm,
it could be the club, it could be the body, or it could be something that's unrelated. What I would suggest for everybody is what I call become an attention detective. Play around with those attentional focus or foci and find out, like you've just said, through your own experience, what seems to work for you to access your skills. This is very different than working on your game. This is very different than working on your golf swing. I think again, I'll even get players wearing 2 hats, literally, where the red hat is when they're going training and they're working on the game, and the blue hat or whatever colour you want is your performance hat, is where you switch to a playing mindset and a playing focus, and the 2 are very, very different.
mm, mm. Well, yeah. Well, let me ask you some more about. So, first of all, my compliments on the book. It's a fantastic read. I am guilty of kind of the cover to cover read, but I really appreciate. There's 46 correct different chapters in here. One could open the index and kind of find what ails them and go to some kind of topic specific lessons, right? I mean, that's a brilliant method for approaching that. So, thank you. Um,
Yeah.
but I did want to. There was one thing in particular that stood out to me. Can you speak to the exercise and the concept of a post shot routine? Because we've all heard pre shot routine, right? Pick your target, maybe visualize, a couple breath, whatever. but a post-shot routine and the exercise you invite your readers to do associated with that, I thought was really, really interesting and frankly very valuable.
Yeah. I think, what we all have experienced over the years is what I call contamination when we play golf, whereby we're trying to play this shot right here, but it's still being contaminated by something that happened 10, 15, 20 minutes ago when you three-putted the last green, or you
Mm.
dunched a chip, or you got unlucky with a tee shot, you got a bad break or whatever it was, and you haven't really put the last shot to bed. You haven't created a post-shot routine, and I think for most golfers, it's the post-shot routine is probably the lowest hanging fruit really, where they could really make a difference in terms of the game. And to me, I'm not even sure what the exercise was in the book now. It's long ago that we read it, but
Well, you
was it
invite
the
golfers to essentially kind of think back to some of the rounds where they played poorly maybe and, like, kinda self-evaluate, what was your demeanor? What was your attitude?
yeah,
You know?
yeah. I mean, that's a great one to look back on your rounds. I mean, I've done that with a few guys where I've said to them, "How much do you think your reactions have cost you over the years if
Mm.
if they're playing on tours?" And, they'll smile and say, "Well, it's thousands, millions of dollars almost that poor reactions." But probably the best tool that folks could try would be what I call facts, not opinions. Because what happens for most of us when we hit a poor shot, we give an opinion, and the opinion is usually something like, "Oh, how dumb was that? That's stupid. I'm useless at this game. I can't play. It's not." These are I'm a crap golfer. My swing's gone. All these opinions that may or may not feel valid at the time, but all that those opinions do is just inflame your emotional brain. Facts are very different. Just try it for the next couple of rounds where when you've hit a shot offline, what are the facts in the sense if it's gone right, say to yourself, "Well, the club face must have been open there. Was it off the toe? Was it off the heel? Did I hit the ground first? Did I
Mm.
hit the ball first?" And actually, when you state out loud a fact about the shot, and it's generally only the big three, as John Dunnigan would say, Adam Young, these guys, face orientation, strike location, and ground contact. If
Yep.
you if you keep your eye on those three, you're not going to be far from the scene of the crime. And just it's amazing when you actually, right, all right, that was off the toe, that was off the heel, that was a bit heavy. By stating a fact of the shot, it tends to neutralize your reaction to it. So you don't inflame yourself
Mm.
by getting carried away with the story of, "Oh, this is dreadful. Why?" All this kind of stuff that initial reaction can become a long story that all of a sudden it's not your day. You kind of metaphorically bail out of there for 4 or 5 holes and the score's gone. So, I think having a think about what your post-shot reactions could be, what have they been like in the past, research your own experience, I think can be a really, really valuable thing for players to do.
You know, Carly, it's a skill I covet and I'm still working on. I don't know if this is insight into what's wrong in Hayes's brain, but one of the challenges, and you're kind of alluding to it, and you talk about this in a subsequent chapter, I think it's chapter 15, is playing one shot at a time. So,
Mhm,
like a shot you just described, right? Where something maybe went awry, offline. I missed the green and it should have been on the green. Whatever the case may be, it's
mhm,
very, very hard for me personally to not think about it in relation to the target of the round that I'm pursuing, right? So if whether if I'm in the hunt I posted a good front nine and now I'm on 13 and I can't stop doing the math on
mhm,
what I need for the rest of the holes to get it into the clubhouse at some sort of what hallmark or some sort of scoring goal, right? And
yeah.
I've never once done that and it's never been productive. It's not a good thing to be doing that, right? How does one cultivate the skill of just playing the next shot in front of me and just flushing the rest until we get to that?
I think one thing that you can do is that a lot of players have found useful before you play, and this would be something perhaps to write in a journal, is make a commitment. A great way of looking at golf. You see, this can get really deep, but I'll try and keep
No, no,
it
no. Let's do it.
relatively.
Let's do it.
See, Chris Neibauer he came on my podcast who's made me radically think differently about a lot of things. That he made it so abundantly clear that when we play golf, the objective reality is when we play golf that we are walking round a field with pieces of rubber that we're hitting, implements that we're hitting these pieces of rubber with. That's the objective reality. If a Martian came down and watched us do it, that's what he would see.
What the hell are you guys doing?
Yeah, why are you doing this and you pay money to do this? So that's the objective reality. Now, what we decide that means, we've made that up. Par is a made up construct. Par fours are a made up construct. 72 par is a made up construct. Now, if what you've made up isn't helping you, you could make up something else. I met Rudy Duran years ago in China when we were out there coaching.
Okay.
What a genius he was. Tiger Woods, his first coach, who's never been given anywhere near the credit he deserved. And he told me about, it's well documented now, but with Tiger Woods when he was a kid, they didn't play par golf. They created Tiger Par. So Tiger would go out there and he was playing par eights and par nines and things like that. So when he shot a 7 on a par 9, he felt great because he could have been playing a par 5 as a kid, taking a 7 and thinking that was dreadful. But he's shot a 7 on a par 9 and he thinks he's fantastic. They made up a reality that helped him. Now, I'll say to like one reality that you could make up is that when you go out and play golf, you could see golf that today when you play, if you're a good player like yourself, you're going to get between 65 and 75 separate individual puzzles to solve.
Okay.
Now, every one of those puzzles is unique and separate. None of them are linked to each other. So that by going, the brain doesn't this idea of one shot at a time. It's like the brain goes, "Oh no, that's too boring for me." That I know the idea of it, but I'm not. That's not a strong enough link. But if you make up the idea that you've got 65, 70, 75 puzzles to solve, and each one's unique, and none of them are related, because we make up that one shot is related to another when it isn't. They're all separate individual tasks and puzzles you've got to solve. And I think this whole idea of if the reality that you embrace when you play golf is detrimental to you, make up something else. There was a great one Ralph Bauer told me about, Mo Norman, that he used to play a lot of golf with Mo. And on one hole, Ralph was playing with him and Ralph said, when I look up on this hole, Mo, it makes me feel really nervous. I see water to the left and out of bounds to the right. And Mo just looked at him and said, well, don't look up. And Ralph thought he was being flippant, but he realized all those years later the genius of Mo Norman was that if looking out there makes you feel uncomfortable, create a different task.
Sure.
So what about if the task was, can I hit a ball over a spot that's just a few feet in front of me? Am I able to do that? And all of a sudden, then that's a different task. So I think there's just so many opportunities to, if your reality isn't helping you, make up another one, because we're just we're given these constructs and we believe these constructs, but they're not real.
Well, Carl, I got to tell you, one of my favorite things about doing this podcast is I get the ability to ask people like you some very self-serving questions, and we're about to do that. So I completely understand and appreciate what you just suggested, but I guess my concern is, what about those events or those goals that one might have where the puzzle is an objective standard, right? And so for me, what I guess where I'm going there is, we've talked about on previous podcast episodes where I'm pursuing PGA professional certification, right? And one of the gates you have to pass is the playing ability test, and there's a certain score that you're required to hit, or lower, in order to pass that requirement. So I guess the question there is, when you have an event like that or some sort of competitive environment, something that's above and beyond the casual round,
Yeah.
the nerves are going to climb. The pressure
Yeah.
climbs. How do you recommend a golfer prepare for that? Because and again, even for me, like if I've got a special round, like a golf trip where I paid a lot of money for it, I tend to not play well that first round because there's been this buildup and kind of crescendo of the round, and it physically manifests in my swing. The tempo gets quicker, maybe the turn gets a little, thoughts on how to bring your A game to those events that kind of matter more than others.
I think the first thing is goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. I think, and I'll get folks to do this, is that if you go and let's say you're playing in an event where you've got to put a score together for your PGA, is is get it out on the table that today there could be a range of options, anything from 70 to 90, whatever your range may or may not be. And actually write that out and write 82 or 90 or whatever on a piece of paper and in your journal and put it out there and actually say, am I prepared to still play knowing that this could happen? Am I prepared to still deal with that? And it sounds really negative, this, and counterintuitive,
Hmm.
because everybody would say, "Oh, you just need to imagine that you're shooting 69 and hitting good shots and hitting green after green." And all that's lovely until you run into that horrible thing called reality where it doesn't turn out that way.
Right.
So again, back to this idea of reducing the threat. If you're finding yourself getting tight in these events, it's because the threat perception has increased in your brain.
Mm.
Well, what is threatening you is the possibility of failure. If you actually get that out on the table before you play and say, "Do you know what? There's nothing I can do to protect me from the fact I could shoot 90 today, but you know what? I'm willing to play anyway. I'm willing to play anyway. I'm going to deal with it. I won't like it. I won't enjoy it, but I'll deal with it." And then your brain goes, "Oh, okay. All right then. He's not quite so threatened by this.
Hmm.
All right. That's the worst that could happen. All right. Well, what game shall we play then when we go out there? Well, maybe instead of playing two sets of nine, where we're trying to score level par for front nine, back nine. Maybe we play a different game. Maybe we make up something different. Maybe we say we're going to play six sets of three and we see how well we can do on each set of three. And when one set of three is over, we start another one. And, play a game, something like that, something that's different to focus on than you've focused on before. But fundamentally, and as I say, this is counterintuitive and it almost sounds really negative. You have to get out on the table the worst case scenario and promise yourself that you'll deal with it, whatever. You'll be embarrassed, you'll be frustrated, you'll be angry, but you'll deal with it. And then the threat in the brain massively reduces. And to me, that's the key component of releasing your capabilities.
Mm. I love that. Carl, again, for all of our listeners, The Mind Caddie is a fantastic book. I mean, there are 46 different prescriptions in there for a lot of different maladies. So, again, thank you for writing it. Um, what is, there's more than just the Mind Caddie book, though. That the Mind Caddie podcast is phenomenal. And I want to compliment you for putting out a podcast of useful content that listeners can apply to their games. Can you tell me about the Mind Caddie app, the Mind
Mm.
Caddie experience in the podcast in the app?
Yeah, the Mind Caddie app is it's kind of like a follow on from the book, really. If if you find some benefit with that, one of the things that the app actually has, it's got various programs in there, specifics of the game, better training around putting and scoring and things like that, and things like post shot routine and acceptance. There's a specific program on acceptance, but the cool thing that we've got now is that there's an AI facility on it where basically everything that I've ever said ever and done and written has all been fed into it, and you can actually have a conversation in real time with me or the AI me, ask it a question and it will answer you. And it's not just cookie cutter stuff. The more questions you ask it, and it will ask you questions as well.
Mm.
It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild, really. But a lot of people have said how much they've started to use it on a regular basis to just ask. nuanced questions about the way that they're practicing the putting or the way that they're practicing the driver or specific things that happen on the golf course. So, yeah, I think you can do a 7-day free trial on that. So I think for most
Yeah.
people, if you give that a go, the Mind Caddie app with the AI facility is pretty cool, really.
Yeah. Now the app is available on the App Store, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then the Mind Caddy, the book, again, that's out on Amazon. I pulled it down, got it in 2 days. I poured through it as soon as I could. Uh, Carl, I don't want to abuse, the privilege you've given us of time on your very, very busy calendar. I'm curious, how many more major champions do you need until you become Sir Karl Morris? Have you looked into the criteria there?
I've not had any English ones, so I don't think I count. I don't think it
Oh, yeah.
counts.
Yeah. Carl,
No,
thanks so much for joining the Bogey Ball Society. Take care.
it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
I told you it was good, right? I mean, doesn't it make you want to go tee it up right now, trying to have the perspective that he describes? I hope you enjoy that one. We have a lot more guests of that caliber coming, but it was phenomenal for Carl to spend his time with us. So thank you so much, Carl. As always, follow us on Instagram, follow us on YouTube, and reach out to us at BogeyBallSociety@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, everybody.